Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. And I know by now, I think everyone knows by heart, Sheikh Bahmanpour has studied in Queen Mary College. And so probably next time you don't need to say that. Okay, I think this doesn't work offline. Okay, first of all, congratulations for the Wiladat of Imam Hassan al-Askari. And inshallah, Allah will bless us with these holy lights, which has placed them as a blessing for all humankind, those who want to seek blessing from them. What we learn from Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam through the traditions that we hear and read in books are two very important things. One is the victory of virtue, the power of virtue, despite all hardships and cruelty that he went through. Because he kept his virtue, everyone, the friend and foe, they praised him and admired him. We have many instances you have heard about this Ali ibn Ubaidullah ibn Khaqan, one of the most bitter enemies of Ahlul Bayt, how he praised Imam Hassan al-Askari in Qom when he was a ruler in Qom. And of course, Qom was, at that time, it was under the very strict Abbasid rule. And also others who have mentioned that. The second thing, first of all, so it was power of virtue. And the second thing we learn is that we should never disappoint under any circumstances to continue to try to convey the message of God. I will talk about the circumstances in which Imam Hassan al-Askari was trying to actually lead the Shia at the time. But the point is, religion has always been under attack at the time of the prophets and afterwards by those who do not want to believe in God, by kafir. The picture that the Quran gives us about the history of faith is very gloomy. You see that every time kullama ja'a ummatan rasuluha kadhabuh. Every time a prophet came to a people, they denied him. Or in another verse we have وَحَمَّتْ كُلُّ أُمَّةٍ بِرَسُولُهَا لَيَأْخُذُوهُ. Every nation, when we sent a prophet, every nation intended to seize their prophet, to kill him. وَجَادَلُوا بِالْبَاطِلِ لَيُدْحِضُوا بِهَا الْحَقِّ. They argued with batil to defeat haqq. Of course, they wanted to seize their prophets. We seized them. فَأَخَذْتُهُمْ. We seized them. They couldn't do it. The fact that Allah seized these people and destroyed them doesn't mean that faith prevailed. It means that faith was defeated, isn't it? The disbelievers were destroyed. But the faith did not spread. Just imagine after the Nuh alayhi salam in that area of the earth, Allah actually completely purged the earth from disbelievers, didn't he? Totally purged the earth. As the Nuh requested, قَالَ نُوحٌ رَبِّ لَا تَذَرْ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ دَيَّارًا. In this land, do not leave any of the kafirin, because if they are there, they are just like a infecting virus. They would infect others as well. إِنَّكَ إِن تَذَرْهُمْ يُضِلُّ عِبَادَكَ. If you leave any one of them, that one person would be enough to infect all others. One disbeliever is enough to infect all others. Now, everyone were purged. The land was purified. Again, after a few generations, you see that the same thing grew. It is something which comes from inside human heart and inside human soul. Disbelief. In the same way that belief comes out of human soul, the inner part, disbelief comes from the inner heart of human being as well. And this battle between haqq and batil, belief and disbelief, would go on until the day of judgment. I think we are living in a very good time in terms of faith. Usually we think that we are living in a very drastic and dramatic time. Faith is something which is regarded to belong to the past nations, and the technology, science, industrialism, and all these things have made faith to somehow to be eclipsed. But if we look into the history of the past nations, we will see that that hasn't this is not the case. We are living in a very good time, actually, of faith flourishing, people listening. That's very important. In the past, people even didn't want to listen. Now people would listen. It's our duty to take this to others. This is very important. وَإِنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتُهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ. This is what the Nuh complains to the Lord. وَإِنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتُهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. Whenever I called them towards you to forgive them, they put their fingers in their ears. وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ. Put their garment on their head. They didn't even want to listen. Now, of course, we are living in a very good situation. Now, if we go back to the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari, we would see that under what condition his Shia were working to bring about the message to everyone who wanted to listen to it. It's very, very, very important too, because if we don't know these stories and the history, then we become disappointed by people. Well, we see many people, majority of the people, would not like to listen. Even the faithful would not listen to the depth of the teachings of their own faith and their own religion. But as I said, if we look into the history, we see that comparatively we are much better off. We are moving towards a better situation, a better world. And inshallah, when we have the Salam Center, we will have even a better world here in London to be able to talk to everyone. Now, before going into that, I would like to mention one very beautiful anecdote from the time of Imam Hassan al-Askari, which is a very fascinating story. And if it was not reported by Kulaini in Al-Kafi, I wouldn't have mentioned it here, because it's a very strange story, very strange. And usually the strangest stories I don't mention if I don't find them in a credible book. Because it's in a credible book, then we realize that this should have been something quite famous, the story. The story is this. At that time, cupping, hijama, was a very important medical practice. And especially more knowledgeable people, they used to do cupping. And nowadays it's coming back. The cupping is coming, especially in Iran. I know that there are many sort of authorized and certified cuppers who have their own practice and everything. Now, the story says one of the cuppers in Samarra was summoned by Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. And this should have been before 252 because of the people who are mentioned in this hadith. And it was just after Salatul Dhuhr, a time when no cupper would ever cup or would have ever cupped at that time. I'm not aware of this sort of science, but a time never ever a cupper would have cupped. And then Imam al-Askari finished his prayer and he showed a vein on his back and said, "Cup here." And this man said, I was very amazed because this vein, I never had seen anyone cupping from that vein. And I thought that this is a mistake. The time is a mistake, the vein is a mistake. But because it was Hassan al-Askari and everyone knew him, of course, Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam was very famous in Samarra. The stories we have, especially because every Monday and Thursday he used to go to the palace. At that time, Samarra was the capital of the Abbasids. Of course, everyone saw that as an honor for him every Monday and Thursday going to the palace from the Askar, because he and his father were brought to the Askar. Askar was was the garrison, the military barrack there, and they were actually accommodated there. They were situated there so that they were under completely 24/7 surveillance by the army. And despite that surveillance, and despite all the guards and everything, Imam had to report to the court every Monday and Thursday. As I said, everyone thought this was an honor, but this was just like if you are under house arrest or deported somewhere, and you have to report to the police every couple of days. And he had to report to the court. He had to go to the court. And I will mention later what blessing this was, and the fool authorities didn't realize that the only way that Imam could communicate with his Shia was on the way to the court. And we have many stories. Unfortunately, this doesn't work here. Otherwise, many stories mentioned by many people who say that, for example, we communicated with the Imam on his way to the court, on his way back from the court. And this was one of the means of communication of the Imam. Now, because of that honor of Imam going every 2 days every week to the palace, everyone in Samarra knew the Imam. And this copper, of course, said, because it was Hassan al-Askari, I didn't mention anything. I didn't mention anything about the time. I didn't mention anything about the vein. I didn't dare to mention anything to him. That this is the wrong time, this is the wrong vein. So I copped. And after a while he said, hold it. I did. I stopped the blood coming. And he said, stay here. Again, tomorrow in the morning, he called me and he said, cop now. And I copped. And then he said, stop. And this happened for a couple of days, for 3 days. At different times, he called me. And then he gave me 20 dinars with clothes and such things and said, thank you very much. I came out perplexed. What was this? What sort of copping was this? In my knowledge of cupping, he was one of the most famous cuppers of Samarra. I never have seen such a cupping for such a long time. And the color of the blood changed at every time. It was very amazing. So he says, I went to Bukhtishu. Now, Bukhtishu, they were a family. They were a Christian family, very famous. They actually had the monopoly of medical knowledge in the Abbasid era for a couple of centuries, the family. And the most famous one was Jibreel ibn Bukhtishu, who was the physician of Harun and Ma'mun, and had surgery on them. And this man who was mentioned, Bukhtishu, should be his son, because we have many Bukhtishu, or many people who are called Bukhtishu because of the family. He says, I went to him. And I said, something is strange I saw. He said, what? I mentioned this story. He said, let's think about it. He took me to the hospital, because these were in charge of the Gundishapur hospital, the Bukhtishu family, which was the greatest hospital and medical research center. And in Samarra, they had, of course, because it was capital, they had one big such hospital. We went there. We studied the books about the way this happened. And 3 days we were studying together, looking into the books. What is this? Why the blood color changed? Why at these times, these specific times, the cupping happened? Why from that vein? Is there any mention of that vein in the books? We didn't find anything. So Bukhtishu told me, there's a monk in Deir Aqul. I don't know where Deir Aqul is. Should have been close to Samarra or somewhere like that. If anyone would know what type of cupping is this, is that monk. No one else knows. He has the ultimate knowledge in this. He said, okay, of course, if I go there, he wouldn't let me talk to him. He said, I write you a letter to him, You go and talk to him. He said, I went to the Deir, to the monastery, and I knocked, and usually these monks lived at the top floor and they never came down. So he shouted at me, what do you want? I said, I have come to visit you, and I have a letter and I have come on behalf of Bukhtishu. He said, do you have a letter? I said, yes. He sent down a basket. I put the letter in the basket, and he took it out. After a while, he came down and said, what's the issue? He says, this is what has happened in Samarra. We had this situation. He says, is the man still there? I said, yes. He said, okay, let's go. We went. Yeah, the day was actually far away from the monastery, far away from Samarra, because we traveled for 3 days until we reached Samarra. And he said, okay, take me to him. I said, take you to whom? To Bukhtishu or to that man? He said, no, take me to that man. And we went to the house of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. We knocked the door, and someone came out and said, the monk of their Agha will come in, without us telling anything or something. He went in. He stayed there it was early morning until noon. He stayed there. And he came out. He had put out all his monastic clothing and had put a nice white clothes. As a Muslim came out. I said, what happened? What happened? You went there as a monk, you come out as a Muslim? He said, I converted by Jesus, son of Mary. What? Jesus, son of Mary, what happens? He says, he explained to me the way you copped him. And I have read the only person before who had copped like this was Jesus. On his own, of course, behest. That the only person who was copped like this before was Jesus. And I now believe in him. Now, so now we went to Bukhtishu. Bukhtishu was somehow shocked seeing this monk in this clothing. He said, what did happen to your religion? He said, my religion, I threw it away. Now I'm a Muslim because of what I saw from Hassan al-Askari. And of course, Bukhtishu, as I said, Bukhtishu himself was a Christian. And we see that how actually the positions in Islamic history are actually given to people who deserved it. It was not based on faith, rather based on ability, on knowledge. And he did. There is no report or no record that he became a Muslim as well, because probably he didn't have that sort of deep faith as this monk had. However, the story tells us how these great people behave like each other. And even in physical terms, they are very similar to each other, Isa ibn Maryam and Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. Very similar in that. And this is a miracle, of course. This is one of the miracles of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam, and something which is, as I said, if this story was not reported by Khomeini, I wouldn't have dared to mention it here. But because it is a very credible story, and someone like Khomeini has relied on this, we can mention this as one of the miracles of Imam Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. Now, under the severest conditions, Imam al-Askari did not stop to spread the knowledge and the duty that he had. What amazes the researchers, and this is a very good thing to do a research, is that despite that very strict surveillance and house arrest that they were in, a very complicated network of wukala were working for Imam Hassan al-Askari. He received lots of homes. Even when he was in Samarra, he received lots of homes and he distributed that homes in a very amazing way. That network of wakala, and the wakala were not disappointed from the position of Imam Hassan al-Askari. They knew that they have a duty and they have to work for it. And they did. Now, even in one occasion, one of the wakala say, we had come to visit Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam on his way to the court. On his way to the court. We were sitting on the road, waiting for him. Just when he was passing, they either gave him a letter or something, or they just exchanged a few words. He says that suddenly a message came to us. ألا لا يسلمن علي أحد ولا يؤمي إلي. Be careful, today no one should greet me with salam. No one should even point at me, because today is a dangerous day. They have mobilized to arrest anyone who talks to me. And Imam, of course, became aware of that beforehand. Under such a situation, that even saying salam to the Imam would have led to the arrest of certain people, Imam did not stop preaching, and the wakala did not stop. It's a very strange thing that how did system of the wakala of the Imam, the deputies of the Imam, work, that as soon as anything happened or a decree was issued or a question was asked, just a couple of weeks after it was issued in Samarra, the Shia in Khurasan knew about it. The Shia in Kufa knew about it. The Shia in Medina knew about it. This is very strange. How did this network, despite that clamp down, how did it work? It's very strange. And it shows the amount of knowledge that the Shia had at that time. The scholars, you see, the scholars are always tough and hard to deal with because they do not accept things easily. They do not accept anything coming to them. They want proof and all these things. And immediately, for example, after the demise of Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam in Samarra, almost everyone knew that the Imam after he is Hassan al-Askari. And almost everyone after Hassan al-Askari, despite the huge security and trying to keep it a secret about Imam al-Asr alayhi salam, just in a month's time, everyone knew that the 12th Imam was the son of Imam Hassan al-Askari, has gone into hiding, despite the claimants, of course. We had the brother of Imam Hassan al-Askari, Ja'far al-Kadhab, who claimed to be his successor, to be the Imam. And if we think that the Shia were just sort of simpletons, that they would have accepted any claim of Imamah, they should have accepted the claim of Ja'far al-Kadhab. Never ever anyone accepted that. Actually, this Ja'far went to Ubaydullah ibn Khaqan, the wazir of the Abbasids, the very powerful wazir. And he said that, I give you 20,000 dinar a year. 20,000 dinars a year. With 100 dinars, you could buy a house. Now, 20,000 dinars a year I give you, and you declare me the Imam after Hassan al-Askari. Now, you can now imagine the amount of homes going to the Imam, because Ja'far was aware of that. So giving 20,000 dinar meant that there was lots of money going. Ubaydullah ibn Khaqan said, I never have seen a fool like you to Ja'far. He said, we have been spending much more than this money to stop people following this Hassan al-Askari. And we haven't been able to do that. Now, you want to give money for people to recognize you as an Imam? These people are not going to recognize you by our decree. They know that we are not one of them. And this shows the amount of course, foolishness in Ja'far, asking Ubaydullah ibn Khaqan, the wazir of the Abbasid, to declare him as the 12th Imam. So this system was very, very, very complicated and strong. And the Imam himself, as I said, under that very, very restricted situation, never disappointed that we have to preserve this faith. We have to communicate with each other. You know, the faith, the religion is always, of course, it comes to one man. And one Imam should preserve the purity of the faith. However, if it is not because of the people, the message never spreads. It's always by the people. And that's why Allah asks the companions of the Prophet to help God, to help him to spread the message. And they were like that. When Imam alayhi salam came out of prison for the last time, after which he passed away, one of his disciples said that I heard he was reciting يريدون ليطفئوا نور الله بأفواههم والله متم نوره ولو كره المشركون. They want to put out the light of God with their mouths, and Allah will complete his light even if the mushrikun are reluctant. And this shows the hope. This shows that if Allah is in charge, of course he would spread this light to every heart who wants to believe in it. Now, the other aspect that I mentioned about Imam alayhi salam was the power of virtue. He was intermittently put in prison. You know, Imam Askari passed away at the age of 28. So he lived a very short life. Despite that, in that very short period of time, he was imprisoned 3 or 4 times for certain periods of time. And it's very strange because the Imam was always under surveillance since he was a young child, actually. Because depending on the different days that they say Imam al-Hadi was summoned to Samarra, some say 10 years before his demise, Imam al-Hadi, some say 20 years before his demise. And if it was 20 years before his demise, Imam al-Askari should have been 3-4 years old. Since then, he was under surveillance and under house arrest. And despite that, he was intermittently, when the caliph changed, they arrested him, they put him in prison. Now, one very important thing that they mention about him is that no prisoner could keep him for a long time because of that power of virtue. He somehow humbled the prisoners. One of the prisoners was Ali ibn Wasif. And he was a very hard man on Ahlul Bayt. And he had imprisoned Imam in a castle. And Banu Abbas came to him and saw that he's not that hard on Imam alayhi salam. And they said, why do you don't put him under harsher circumstances? قالوا افعل بي وافعل. Do whatever you want. Extremely be hard on him. He says, I have tried, but I haven't been able to. Last time, I appointed 2 of the people whose rashness were somehow exemplar in the whole area. And after a while, I saw that they were serving him, bowing before him, kissing his hand. And I was amazed. I asked them what happens. They said that we don't know. This man prays all night, fasts every day. And when we look at him, it's awesome. The ubuha that we see in him, the awesomeness we see in him. Ali ibn Jareen was another man who was put in charge of his prison at another time. And Ali ibn Awtamish was another man, several men. And all these people mentioned that no one will put in charge unless they actually follow Hassan al-Askari in his behavior, in his manners. This is the power of virtue. And the way he dealt with those members of the family who were somehow not dealing nicely with him. The same thing. And that power of virtue uh, eventually prevailed, and Imam became one of the most respected people, not only among the Shia, even among the enemies of the Imam alayhi salam. Now, the lessons we learn, one, of course, from that story of Imam not being disappointed in sending out the message, we should never be disappointed. We have a duty. We have to think that we are just an instrument of God, so to speak. First of all, we have to receive the message correctly ourselves and with open heart, and then try to spread it. This is one thing. The second thing is that we can never win with argument. We can never win with sword. We can never win with rashness. We can only win with virtue. And this has been, of course, the manner of all prophets. They have won with virtue. Of course, if they were attacked, they defended themselves. That's a different thing. They did not fight other people to bring them into faith. They did not fight them to compel them to believe, because we know it's not possible at all. La akraha fi din. If they were attacked, they defended. وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَهُدِّمَتْ صَوَامِعُ وَبِيَعٌ وَمَسَاجِدُ وَصَلَوَاتٌ وَمَسَاجِدُ يُذْكَرُ فِيهَا اسْمُ اللَّهِ كَثِيرًا. If it was not for people defending the places of worship, then all places of worship, synagogues, churches, mosques, they would have been destroyed. It's people who defend it. However, defending is one thing, but trying to convey from heart to heart is another thing. And that doesn't come by rashness, by rudeness, by swearing, but by cursing and by these things. It doesn't come like that. It comes with virtue. And if people see that you are virtuous, that is, of course, a da'wah in itself. Inshallah, Allah will help us to learn from the story of our A'imma and to have them as our, of course, ultimate role model in whatever we do. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin.
We now have time for some question and answers. Are there any questions from either side?
Sorry.
Alaykum as-salam.
Were the wakils of the 11th Imam, were they scholars themselves? Were they accountants? Were they politicians? What, I mean, who were they in their life? And what was their role as a wakil? Was it just to collect khums? Was it just to be a mouthpiece for the Imam? Was it anything more than that? Did they have jobs otherwise?
Yeah, of course, they had their own jobs. They were not actually, this was not a job. Being a wakil of an imam was not a job, actually. They had their own jobs, and we have certain jobs actually attributed to many of these wakala, like Zayyat and Samman and these things. Their duty was not just to collect khums. Of course, they communicated the message of Imam to people, and also communicated back the message of the people or the questions of the people to the Imam. They somehow brought the news from different quarters to the Imam alayhi salam. And therefore, they were just like eyes and ears of the Imam here and there, as well as being, of course, the messenger of people to the Imam. In terms of being a scholar or not, of course, not all of them were scholars. We have, for example, among the deputies of Imam al-Askari, we have Ali ibn Mahziyar, who was a scholar. But not all his deputies were scholars. And among even the deputies of Imam al-As, not all of them were scholars. Because being a deputy didn't mean that you need to be a scholar. You actually needed to be a clever person who could arrange and manage things properly. Now, this can be done by a scholar, and sometimes certain scholars cannot do that. They don't have that ability to do it. And can be done by ordinary people. And of course, the ordinary people just took the message. They didn't, so for example, wrote books or compiled ahadith and such things. So this was the situation.
That system can't be translated into the current marja'iyya system where you've got a top scholar and he has different wakils and they're all scholars as well. It's not a direct comparison, you can say. Or you can't say that one stems from the other. It just so happens that it looks similar.
It looks similar because it is created out of necessity, and necessity is the same. I mean, one person cannot be the point of reference for everyone in the world or everyone in different places, so you need these wakala. Of course, at the time of the Imams, wakala, because especially after Imam Reza alayhi salam, there was a clampdown on Aimma alayhi salam. So the wakala actually brought lots of danger upon themselves to be a wakil of the Imam. And they knew that if, for example, they got arrested, with all that information that they had, if they were tortured or something, it was not a very easy job, of course, at that time. It's easier now. As I said, we are living in a nice time in terms of faith and madhab, alhamdulillah.
Side.
Sheikh, I'm just trying to understand the historical context of the state of affairs as far as money and finance of the governments are concerned. On one hand, you said there was a lot of money coming for khums. On the other hand, if I understood you correctly, the majority of people were, if you like, non-believers, and they did not follow. So how was the tax system?
What do you mean majority of people were non-believers?
Because you said they were, if you like, doubters, and they would not, they were not probably Muslims, or at least did not contribute towards the khums, etc.
Well, at the time of the Abbasids, of course, we had a huge territory. There were not only zakat. Of course, zakat was a huge fund coming in. There were jizya, there were other taxes which were coming in. So if you talk about the government and the Sunni sort of taxation, of course that was there. And the Shias had to pay that tax as well. Khums was exclusively collected by the Imam, except for the booties of the war, which the government, of course, took the khums of it as well. But the number of the Shia was quite considerable at that time. There were not just a few people here and there. They were quite considerable. They were spread throughout from, as I said, from Khorasan, which is now in somehow Turkmenistan and those areas, up to Egypt. We had Shias taking homes in Bahrain. We had many Shias in Sistan. Near Pakistan, we had many Shias. In Iraq, in Lebanon, Syria, all these places, we had many Shia. In Persia, many Shia, they were sending homes to the Imam. So it was huge money. And the point is that many of the hardships that the Imam endured was because of the khums, because the caliphs were worried that how this money was being spent. Do they buy arms with it? Do they hire soldiers with it? Imam Musa al-Kazim alayhi salam was killed by Harun because of khums, because his nephew went to Harun and said, I never have seen two caliphs in one territory. And Harun said, what? What do you mean two caliphs in one territory? He said, some people give here to you tax in Baghdad, and some people give tax to Musa ibn Ja'far in Medina. This is two caliphs in one territory. And it was for that reason that Musa ibn Ja'far was arrested and put in prison and later on killed by Harun. So it was a matter of concern for them all the time. Yeah.
Any questions on the sister side?
Thank you very much, Sheikh. I wanted to ask about Ja'far al-Kadhdhab and other sort of deviants in the tree of sort of the progeny of the Prophet. How did the community deal with these people? Because they came from quite an established lineage, and presumably people find it difficult when these people who were on superficially respectable started making these claims.
Well, what do you say about the children of the sons of Ya'qub? Directly from the Prophet, went they? And they deviated like that. And what do you say about Qabil, for example, killing Qabil? The same thing. And the Shia actually were very clever when it came to the successorship of the Imam. They tested anyone who claimed that they were Imams. And the case of Abdullah al-Aftah after Imam as-Sadiq is very, very telling, that he claimed Imamah, and many Shias believed in him because he was the eldest son after Ismail, and no one thought that he would ever lie about Imamah. But then when the scholars went to him, they asked him questions and he couldn't answer, and the scholars just said, this is not Imam. It's not possible. Even if this is the eldest son of the Imam or whatever, he cannot be Imam because he doesn't know the answers to the questions that we ask. And then, of course, they were guided to Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam. So, yeah, I mean, they made a fool of themselves, these people who claimed what did not belong to them. They just made a fool of themselves.
Any more questions? I think we'll end the salawat.